everyone. In this video we are going to take a look, or should I say another look, at working on the ETL project. Now in this case, this is my second milestone video, and I'm a little further along in the process, and that's what we're going to look at. One of the things that becomes pretty apparent as you start working on the project is that there's a lot of things to be done, and it's really about organization. The individual problems that come up aren't that difficult as long as you're very organized. I mean, yes, you have to look on the internet and you have to make some decisions, but in general, the biggest problem that people face on a daily basis in every job is being organized. So for example, in the previous video, I had everything in one file, but I've broken my code into 3 files now. The current file we're looking at is called postload. So it's milestone 2, or excuse me, preload. Milestone 2 preload ETL code. And in this I have the code that we saw in the previous video, in which case I go through and I drop the foreign key constraints on all the tables using stored procedures. I then go through and truncate all the tables. In this video, I've also added on an error message. So if I had a problem, the error message would show me what was the issue. Truncating table DBO dim dates, ETL process, could not find the dim dates table. Did not exist or don't have permissions. I would fix that and run the code. And now I can see that, yes, indeed, the code has successfully completed both pieces of the preload, which is to drop all the foreign keys and clear out the tables. Now I'm just doing a simple incremental loading. That's all you really have to do in this project. We could make it more complex, but I think you'll agree that it's already complex enough. Next. The load process is going to have me insert some data. And we didn't finish that in the first video, but what we did finish was the post load, the stuff that happens after the table is loaded. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that that code works too, because I moved it into a separate file. All this does is replace the foreign key constraints. And once again, I've added, oops, I guess I didn't add, I need to. I'll add that to my stored procedures in my newest version. Well, luckily for me, there's not that many of these. Let me see if I got them all. Missed that one. Any more? Nope, that's the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I think this is the last one, 6. Okay, save my work and try again. Now, every time I make changes like this, I really have got to be disciplined about running the code and make sure you always run it twice. That'll work both times. Sometimes things get out of sync. It appears that it works, and then when you go submit it, you find out that it didn't. Now, at this point, it means that I should be able to go through and drop the foreign key constraints and put the foreign key constraints back on. So over here in my loading code, I can take all that code out and just make sure I can execute these bits of code. So drop the foreign key constraints. We got red lines here, but it's a lie. Sometimes when that happens, you just have to reconnect. Sometimes it doesn't work, but as you'll see here, IntelliSense change the database. IntelliSense is not accurate in this case. There we go. Sometimes if you know better, you just have to trust yourself. And of course, at the end of this, I have the code that puts it all back on. So all I have in this file here, this middle file, is the actual code to execute the stored procedures that does my ETL processing. Okay, that's step one. So now I have things a little bit more organized, and I want to come back up to the top and continue my work on the various different tables. So one of the things that you probably found is that there's an issue with the date time stuff. This happens on a regular basis. It's really kind of annoying. The issue is that the the shift table doesn't have really normalized data types here, or date types. You see they have 9 o'clock in the morning, and we assume that they're not shipped, it's not ending at 5 in the morning, it's actually ending at 5 in the afternoon. But again, this is kind of common. This one here is a little even less forgiving or forgivable because it has a mix. It has the 1 to 2100. So at 9 o'clock, if you're using 2100 here, you should be using 1300 here, and this really should have been bumped up to 17. So it just makes it so much easier to do your calculations, and you need to resolve that. Now, there's a couple ways you can resolve it. You can resolve it by just updating the source data. Now, you can't always get away with that, but sometimes you can. So if I would have run this, I do the update statements. When I run it again, it'll be done. And I can just make a stored procedure that normalizes the time data and the doctor schedules database.dbo.shifts. It won't let me put dots in there, but I can put underscores, but I'm just going to leave it as those. Good enough. And the issue is, of course, that it's going to, the thing it's trying to do is normalize these values. Other than that, the body of the code and the stored procedure is the same as the one we saw in the previous video. Plus I put in a fancier error message. But other than that, it's the same stuff that I had earlier, where I have a return code, I have the begin try, I have my code here. I turned off the count so I don't have to see the line numbers. Now, once that's done, I can continue on. And basically what I did is I took my spreadsheet and looked up the thing I was trying to accomplish. Like I'm working with clinic data. Yep, is that right? Let's see, that doesn't look right. Here we go, this is the one I want. So these are the things I need to do, and I just copy those out and I paste them over here just so I have a nice little list of things I need to do. And I start going through, and I'll make a view. Now this is not necessary, but it is considered best practice. If you can transform things in a view, this abstract layer is going to be great. Now if you had pulled the clinical data from the patient's database, you would find that in that database the values were 100, 200, 300. Let me show you what I mean. So this is the, let me bring it up here. Oops. Just a second. Patients database, and I'm looking at clinics. There we go. Okay. 100, 200, 300. You can see that we have the city name, kinda. We have the clinic name. It's the same as the city name, and you got the address. Not really great data. On the other hand, if you look in the doctor schedules database, source database, it's a lot more fleshed out. It's certainly better data. So we need to come up with a game plan about what we're going to do. And the easiest way to resolve this is just use the data from the doctor schedules database. It seems to be clearer, it seems to be cleaner, and we have it normalized by just using 1, 2, 3. Now, if you chose to pull the data from here, I don't find it likely, but if you did, you'd have to figure out what you're going to do to normalize it. What that would mean is going through, whenever you find a 1 to pull in from like the clinics, you put a 100. When you find a 2, go 200. And you can do that with just a simple select case statement. In my case, though, all I really did was I went to make sure we had nulls figured out, although it didn't seem to have any issues. I want to make sure that, let's see, the character data has been upgraded. So I just went ahead and put in my cast. You know, and some of this stuff, the cast is just not necessary, but it is so small. I'm just going to go ahead and do it anyway. I verify that my select statement works. I wrap it up in a view. And then I make a stored procedure that uses that view. Again, same template as I had before. I just select against the view, make sure that the view works. And then after I get the view working, I make sure the insert works. And after I get the insert working, I wrap it all up in a stored procedure. Now I can try to execute the stored procedure. It's probably a good idea. But keep in mind that if I execute it a second time, I'm going to be double counting my values. A third time, or fourth time. This is accepted because we're using a surrogate key. Now, this is an issue. There is a way of solving it. You guys do not need to do it. Basically, I just have to validate that the data going in through the system is not the same as what's there. Or just make sure that the order of operation, when I set up my SSIS packages, that it always truncates before it tries to call the stored procedure. And that's probably the easiest way to resolve it. Okay, so it's working. Yes, I'm getting double counts right now, but that's not going to be an issue when I run the entire thing. In fact, at this point, as I showed you previously, I would just go ahead and run the entire thing. And continue on. Next one would be dim doctors. Same scenario. I do have to combine the first name and last name. I pick up the email address, although I question the wisdom of actually having the email address in the data warehouse. I think in another version I'll take it out. It's there. I'm going to fill it up. Dr. Zip, again, I'll question the wisdom of having that. That's probably going to go in a later version. But if you're watching this video and it's not in your database, you didn't miss anything. Both those were probably useless. But if it is in your database and you need to fill it up, this is the code that'll take care of it. Just go ahead and run that code. It works, and then I once again take that code, I select it from the view, then try to insert it using the view, and then wrap it up in the stored procedure. Oops, one more line of code. And the next bit. Now, some of you will probably pause the video and take a look at the code and try to decide whether you want to use it or not by typing it in. And you know what? That's perfectly fine. This is really about a learning process. But I'm not going to give you the code. You have to type it in all yourself, make sure all the typos are fixed. You would have eventually come up with this code or something very much like it. Dim doctors is going to be, I guess dim doctors. This other one's going to be pretty much the same. So concatenation to do. Column names change, but nothing much is going on there. Handle my nulls the same way. When it comes to zip, I'm just going to put a -1. Kind of useless, but again, the zip code's not all that useful. You will notice that the column names are different between the two tables, which is unfortunate. And after that's done, I just go through and create the stored procedure by making the select statement, making sure that that select statement works. Once the select statement works, I make sure that the insert works along with it. And I think you see how this continues to go. The procedure wasn't too bad either. However, of course, the big problem is that the word procedure is a key word. So there are times where you have to make sure that you wrap square brackets around it. In this case, it doesn't seem to be an issue in the view. Pretty easy one. The insert statement is just used, just like we saw before, and it's all goes together. Now, dim shift is where things get really quite interesting. because you have that silly time column in the database, and as was mentioned earlier, it wasn't really well designed. So if I come back over here and I take a look at the options I have, right now we have 9 to 5, 1 to 21. Again, this is purposely bad. This kind of stuff happens in real life. So how can I resolve it? Well, I can go ahead and update the source database if that's possible, but if not, I need another plan. And here's a way of doing it. So you can see I've gone through and made a view, and that's what you can't see. Let me switch this around a little bit. That way you guys can see it a little easier. Oops, not what I had in mind. I think one more. Okay, yeah, looks like it's all on the screen now. So shift ID is a piece of cake. I just get that from the shifts. And shift start, if there's a null value, I can go ahead and cast it over as 0, 0, but there's no nulls. Shift N, same thing. When I start looking at this data though, I can actually extract out the hour by using date part. But in doing so, I get 9 and 1. Now, if this had been updated from 1 to 13, I would get 13. That's exactly what I'd want. In fact, the easiest way to resolve this is to update the source data. But in this case, I don't. I didn't update the source data, so I end up with this. Let's say you politically cannot update the source data. Well, if that's the case, then I'll just have to come up with another plan. My other plan is this. I'll use the immediate if, which goes through and says, check to see if this is true. This, in this particular case, is it true that the shift date, let's say the first row that comes in, is the start shift is 9. Is it within this list of values? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And the answer is yes. When that occurs, go ahead and leave it as it is. The way this statement works is, if this is true, then evaluate as this value. But if it's something else, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it's then going to go through and add on 12. Not a perfect solution, but it does the job. And now we'll have the values of 13 instead, 9 and 13 instead. Now, luckily for us, our clinic opens at 9. In fact, because of that, I can probably even take that out. And the shift is going to end at a later date. This is a start shift. So, but the end shift's got the same kind of issue. I just have to make sure I do a different set of numbers. I'm going to the lower end of the scale here, and I just add 12 if it is in one of these. So if it's 1, it becomes 13, 2, 14. If it's marked as 9 o'clock, it'll be at 21, and that's exactly what we want. It'll bring in the value. Again, not a great solution. There's some ways that people could still mess it up, but it does the job. And with those transformations in place, I can now go through and pull in the normalized values to put into my dim shifts table. So now I'll have 21 and 13 instead of 1 and 9. If you went ahead and just updated the source data, you wouldn't need that. But if you did both, if you update the source data, this code that I just showed you will still work. So that takes care of that little issue, and then we fill up the dates using code that we've seen previously. And then we finally get into our fact tables. Fact table, once again, I'll start off with a view. One of the things that people have had questions about is, what do I do about this, the work hours? Well, you just subtract the start time and the end time. The problem is because I'm using a time data type, I need to come up with some kind of way of doing that. The easiest way is to use date diff and just tell it the difference you want to look at is the hours. You could try to convert it to an integer and then subtract it that way. That's certainly a way to go. I gotta say though, one of the mistakes that is kind of obvious is that the data warehouse should have had is that right? Yeah, the shift date and end time really should just be an integer value instead of a time value. It's easier to convert over from the integer to a time in those few times you need it than from time to integer. So, another thing that's happened in the date key, I didn't mention it, but you'll see there's an identity column. I think that's a design issue. It shouldn't be there. So, in future versions, I might take it out, but in the original version, it definitely was in there, and you had to plan accordingly. I did so by just using an identity insert on before I started filling out the table. So back over here in the fact table, once I get this, it's pretty much downhill. Remember that the way you test these things are, you get all the original values working, and then you just kind of do one piece at a time. So make sure that works, and then you add on another column and another set of tables, and you check that out, and you add some more until you finally get it going. Case in point, when I get down to the the view. So once the view is made, then I get down here and I just do the insert through the view. Most of my transformations are happening through the view. You could, of course, do the transformations in the store procedure. But I got to say, since you might be using those ETL views for other reporting purposes or ETL processing, such as filling up tabular structures, it's nice to have it in the cube or in the view. Okay, next, last one here is this fact visit table. Not too hard at all. Big challenge was the date. And the reason is that in the visits table, the date has hours, minutes, and seconds. And you don't really need hours, minutes, and seconds. In fact, you have to beg the question: do I really need to see those hours, minutes, and seconds? The fact is I don't necessarily need that value, so I can leave it off. Or if I want to, I can go through and once I found the value, so I can just extract that out. And but I'll have to, in order to do that, I will have to make another column here that will accept the hours, minutes, and seconds, because right now it's just an integer. And that could be an issue. Now, it's not the end of the world, because what I can do is I can just go ahead and create another artificial key, such as the hours. So right now I have 2005-01-01. I could just add on, let's say the appointment's at 9:15, 0915, and that would be my key. It'd be a combination of the date key and the hour key. But in general, this does make it more difficult. So for the purposes of this, we're just going to go ahead and only take the date. That's all we're going to use. Everything else will still work out just fine. We still have a different visit ID, etc. When we go through and we do our reports, what we'll see is that on a particular day we had so many patients. We won't be looking at how many hours, at 9 o'clock on that particular day, or at 10 o'clock on that particular day. But you know what? That's all right. There's not that many visits in the whole thing anyway. And once that is done, let's see, we just use the store procedure and get that. And that actually wraps it up. Now, in this case, I have my code that calls drops foreign key constraints and then clears out the tables and replaces them. And so if I run this, if I run this, it should do everything. It should drop the foreign key constraints, truncate all the tables, insert all the dimension data, fill up the fact tables. Oops, looks like I got a misspelling error there. We'll go find that. That's one good thing about this. Okay, that's it. And it's fact Dr. Schiff's, not Jen. That's a copy and paster if I ever saw one. Okay, fact Dr. Schiff's. Any other place? Let's see. That's all right. Okay, run the whole thing again. Okay, there's our clearing of the tables. There's our filling of the dimension tables. Here's our filling of the fact table, and here is our replacement of the foreign key constraints. We look at the numbers, and those numbers look good. Now, at that point, I'll save all my work, and then I'll bundle it all up as part of our project. At this point, in this milestone, I have my solution development document, I have my ETL code. And so the next step would be to go through and take that ETL code and create a SSIS package. So I'll make a blank solution. I will wrap up these files into folders, well, my documentation of folders. I will add those files to the blank solution, and then I'll go ahead and create my SSIS package and use my preload store procedures, then my load store procedures, and my post-load store procedures to fill up everything. And I'll take care of that portion, leaving me only to deal with those imported files and their little silliness as far as some bad data in them. Okay, hopefully that pushes everybody along a little bit. And again, I wish you luck on the final. Go ahead and make sure that you share ideas and talk amongst yourself in the forums. That's what they're there for. And really, this is a difficult project. I want you guys to share ideas and concepts. I don't want you to get too discouraged. Just do your best and just keep at it. Okay, talk to you later.